Progressives are gathering for a big meetup in Ottawa this weekend. It's called the Progress Summit, and it's organized by the Broadbent Institute. It's billed as a pan-progressive, not just for the NDP members, but for progressives of all stripes. Ed Broadbent himself opens the conference tonight. So what does he think more progressives need to do to get elected? Is a coalition or some sort of cooperation in the cards for the Liberals and the NDP? And what can Tom Mulcair do to boost his popularity? Joining me now, the chair of the Broadbent Institute, Ed Broadbent. Good to see you, Mr. Broadbent.
Good to be back.
Always nice to chat with you. So this is your first ever summit for the Broadbent Institute, the Progress Summit. And you've really, I did a story on it a number of months ago. It's sort of the left-sided version of the Manning Centre. That's something people are very familiar with. Are you comfortable with that comparison?
Very comfortable. I have said many times that the conservative people on Democratic right, Mr. Manning specifically, have had their organizational push some years ago, and they've had some impact. And we, on the Democratic left, have, in that sense, some catching up to do. And so the Institute came into being to have the kind of conference we're having now, where competitive ideas on the left side of the spectrum, on the economy, on inequality, on the environment, will have a voice and hopefully an impact on politics.
So how critical is it to get progressives, as you call them, together in the same room having that kind of discussion? How important is that for going forward for the future
I think it is very important. For example, I do not know over half of the panelists myself, and there are 60 of them, and I dare say a good half of them don't know each other as well, and they're from different parts of the country, Francophone, Anglophone, and they do intellectual policy-oriented networking. So that's an important part of this to carry on after the weekend. But so the networking is important, but coming up with some concrete ideas to feed into the real world of politics, if I can put it that way, is also important.
So who is the party then that takes the ideas and runs with them?
Well, I would hope the party that's near and dear to my heart would do so, the NDP. I hope. We're independent. But if other parties choose to pick them up, and sometimes I've noted that in the past, that other parties have picked up left of center social democratic ideas, and we really want to fuel the debate. And
it's an idea generator.
It's an idea generator, but with a practical goal too. I mean, the measure of success is either at the municipal, provincial, or federal level. Some of these ideas will make sense to the politicians who have to act out there in the political world.
It isn't the idea as well to build a way forward for progressives to get elected? At all levels, I suppose, right?
Well, that's the other dimension of our work, if you like. We not only have the policy discussions, but in fact, the day we're doing this interview, there's a training session for activists. So we take, that is to say, people in the program, get mostly young people who, at whatever level, provincial, federal, municipal, having a problem in their area and they want to politicize it. How do they put it on the political agenda? How do they get politicians to adopt something or at least respond? So we are training activists that way too, to get involved in their communities, get involved in the political process. So it's two-dimensional, policy on the one hand and training activists on the other.
Okay, so it's about getting the progressive movement in charge of things, essentially. I want to talk to you about cooperation and we can talk about it formally or informally, because that's also part of what the Broadbent Institute is doing, right? Trying to open up the tent a little bit, would that be fair to say? And bring all sorts of progressives together, Liberals, NDP, Greens, whomever. Yeah,
if you look at the number of people who are, again, on our I'm not going to name any of them because I'll leave some out, but there are a number of well-known Canadians who have never been associated with the NDP, but are thoughtful, and we want the tent, to pick up on your own metaphor, to be big enough, not to include people that would go to the Manning Institute, but who are left of center people, and dare I say it, a number of them, when they have voted for other parties than the NDP.
Right. Okay. So speaking of cooperation, the idea of cooperation/coalition came up a number of weeks ago with Mr. Mulcair and Mr. Trudeau, and I want to play viewers a couple of clips, and then we'll talk about it. Take a look.
We've proven over the years we're always open to working with the others. We're a progressive party. My priority is to get rid of Stephen Harper's Conservatives.
I was very clear during my own leadership that I was not going to entertain any discussions around coalition, and I received a very strong mandate from Liberals to hold to that, and I will hold to that.
Okay, so that's the leader's perspective on cooperation right now. You've been there, you've attempted it in 2008. I was there chasing you down a hall to try and give me details. What do you think is the likelihood of parties moving in that direction again? As the voice, as you're trying to represent the voice of progressives, how much do progressives need to come together to get rid of a Conservative government or to govern?
I think I agree completely with what I heard Tom Mulcair say, that, say, as recently when I was there and Jack was our leader, we cooperated. In fact, we cooperated at times with Mr. Harper when he was in opposition to then the short-lived government of Mr. Martin on certain issues.
Yes.
And so I think that's responsible in the parliamentary system. If you have a government and you're in opposition, on some issues you can work together. But cooperation is one thing, coalition is quite another.
Yes.
And I think it's not for me to say what the party should do after the next election at all. That's Tom's job and the caucus. But I think they're going to look for ways to get on the agenda of Parliament what they think most people in Canada want.
But do you think that coalition attempt will ever be replicated? Or do you think that was a one-off, what you did?
I'm not, it's crystal ball gazing. In our system, I really don't know.
No.
I think we're here indefinitely with a multi-party system.
Sure.
And whether that will work out in coalition forms at some time between what parties, I have no idea. But I do know that parties in our system should try on agenda items to cooperate with each other. Yeah. And Jack, if I may say so, did that better than I did when I was leader, I think. I mean, he had a real disposition to say, I want to get things done, and I'm willing to, not abandon principle, but to work with other parties to get something done. And I think that should be the agenda. How that's implemented is another question.
Or what it looks like. Do you see an openness, though, for that from the Liberals? Because I'm not sure that I do.
I don't know. The traditional explanation given by most parties most of the time is we're here to win, and we'll see what happens after. And I understand that. And as I understand Mr. Trudeau, that's the position he's taken.
I have a couple policy issues that I want to get your take on since you're here. The Fair Elections Act, we've been talking a lot about it. I don't know how closely you're following it. There are a lot of people, according to an Abacus poll, Canadians, 60% don't think that the legislation will have an impact on elections. Do you think that opposition parties are doing a good job pointing out the problems? Do you yourself have any concerns with some of the changes the government's making?
Deep concerns. Yeah. As a former head of Rights and Democracy, when I left politics, we used to talk about democratic political institutions in developing countries and work with them. At that time, Canada was seen as a model. Now, the very time, for example, that Mr. Harper is in Ukraine promoting democracy, his own government is being denounced by 19 academics from 6 countries for the quote-unquote Fair Elections Act because it suppresses the vote. And virtually every expert that's commented, forget politics, forget the government side or the opposition side, every expert that I know of in the country, in Canada or outside, has said this is not good for democracy. And I agree. It's especially because of its net effects on First Nations communities, seniors, and young people.
Particularly the vouching issue.
The vouching issue, which disproportionately affects all those groups. Yeah. It's very negative. And take your figure, 80 to 120,000 Canadians otherwise would have been able to vote on a voucher basis will be excluded. And I do not think it's an accident that most of those people vote for parties other than the Conservatives. And so we have a government that is really acting in an anti-democratic way. If I can add to this, when
Yes.
I was in the House with different prime ministers, with Mr. Mulroney, Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Clark, no, always these changes were made in the electoral system on the basis of consensus with the parties. That was the whole tradition. It was all the parties would get together and change the rules if they're going to be changed. Not one government changing the rules, especially for its own advantage.
Fair elections is one thing, but before Christmas and even now, there's, as you know, a lot of focus on the Senate and what to do with the Senate. I know in the NDP's position on the Senate, which is to abolish it. When you watch that place now, where do you think it is headed and the people in it are headed? Do you think we're coming to the end of the Senate? Do you think it has to change dramatically?
Yes, well, I'm very much on the side of not needing the Senate. If we have a House of Commons, the original idea for the Senate was basically an anti-democratic one. In fact, Sir John A. Macdonald once said, one of the purposes of the Senate is to protect minorities, and the rich will always be a minority, he said. And we don't need a second chamber, in my view. It is an inhibiting factor. We have a representative House of Commons. We update it on the basis of population change once a decade or so. I think it should be abolished. And the performance of a number of senators, which has been quite scandalous, feeds into that. But even the good senators, obviously, the vast majority, I'm sure, are good individuals. But my view is it's an undemocratic institution. Rather than reforming it, just get rid of it.
Last question. Tom Mulcair really led the charge on the Senate scandal through the fall, got a lot of kudos for his performance in question period, asked some good, tough questions of the government. But yet, for some reason, that isn't translating for him in terms of, polls, take them or leave them, and people's recognition of him. Why do you think that is? Is there something there that he's not able to get past? Is there something more he could do?
I don't know what more Tom could do. I mean, he in 1 week, he took the Senate issue from being a scandal about the Senate to being about the Prime Minister. And he did that. He dominated the House of Commons. No one else has done that since Mr. Harper's been Prime Minister. He's been a forceful leader. God knows why polls change for individuals. I think if you did a survey with your colleagues and said who's the best performer in the House of Commons in our parliamentary system right now, then it would be Tom Mulcair. That it hasn't totally reflected itself yet with the population, that's true. But there's time to go, and there'll be many other issues. He's now talking about the suppression of democracy, doing an effective job on that. I think he should just keep doing what he's doing.
Mr. Broadbent, always a pleasure to speak with you. Good luck on the weekend.
Thank you very much.